Okay. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Tonight is October 22nd, 2024, 8:14 p.m. To be session one of the 2024-2025 Course of African Philosophy curriculum, hosted by UNIA-ACL Division 421, the Dr. Julius Nyeri CBPM Division. As always, we open our sessions, our meetings with rituals. Officers, I need officers to step up. Brother Macias, I think you are the next senior officer. If you could, please lead us in the pledge to the UNIA flag. Brother Macias. Brother Malik, are you available? All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Would you do us the honor of leading us in the pledge to the UNIA flag?
I commit my body, mind, and spirit.
I commit my body, mind, and spirit
to the protection, defense, and security.
To the protection, defense, and security
of the red, black, and green.
Of the red, black, and green.
I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa.
I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa.
And the liberation of her scattered Black children.
And the liberation
of scattered Black children.
I accept for myself and my descendants.
I accept
for myself and my descendants.
The teachings of universal African nationalism.
The teaching of universal African nationalism.
And I promise that our children will be instilled.
And I promise that our children will be instilled
with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people.
With the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people.
In order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail.
In order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter or fail.
Until all Black people are free and united.
Until all Black people are free and united.
Through one God, one aim,
through
one destiny.
One God,
one aim,
and one destiny.
Okay, so let me just say something. We turned around and we did the pledge of the UNIA flag, Brother John, President John. And look on here what it says. In the liberation of her scattered Black children,
yes,
right? And then she go in here and said, I promise that our children will be instilled. What? With the purpose and the knowledge of themselves as African people, in order the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail. So again, it's imperative for us to have doulas in the communities, okay, for our children, and to also help their parents. And as we help their parents, we are helping them to be a part of us, to really know what's going on as our struggle and our fight goes on, but also the purpose of saving our babies. All these children, what did it say? It didn't say Brother John children or Brother Cecily children. It said all children. See? It said all children. Under the redemption of what? Mother Africa.
Yes.
So all children matter. All our melanated children matter.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Sister Desiree, as I said, we will make that an agenda item for the upcoming Black Cross Nurse Black Cross Nurse meeting. We'll speak with our Lady President, head of Black Cross Nurses, to make sure that's a priority. Okay. We got quite a bit to get through tonight. Tonight is an introduction to the course. We will officially start lesson 1 next week. Tonight we will look at some of the history of the course, and we will finish up reading the preface and the foreword of the course. That way we're ready to go into lesson 1, and we don't miss any of this monumental text. Okay, so for new members, new officers, individuals that this is new to, we are going through Message to the People, the course of African philosophy. This is the 88th year. Mr. Garvey started this course in 1937, and this is our 2024 curriculum, again, offered by Dr. Julius Nyeri, CBPM, Division 421, Atlanta of the UNIA-ACL. What we'll do today, not the 20th, is it? That's the wrong date. Yeah, say 22nd. What we'll do tonight, let me fix that. Program for tonight, we did the rituals. We'll do a brief roll call. I think I missed that. We'll go through a brief history of the course. We'll look at the curriculum that we will be going through this year. And again, as I said, we'll end with the preface and foreword. My recording secretary is let me see, I think, yeah, Brother Art said he would be calling in, so I'll take care of recording secretary duties for the time being. Roll call, you have myself, Brother John, President, Division 421. We have our Lady President, Rod Ebony. We have our First Vice President, Brother Omasius. Have our, I believe Sister Diane is on the iPad. I'm gonna just say that. First Lady Vice President, Sister Diane. Second, Male Vice President, Brother Malik. Second Lady Vice President, Sister Cecily. We have our third Vice President, Brother Eric. And we don't have our third Lady Vice President. Okay, that takes care of presidents. Counsel General, Attorney Imhotep Akibalan. Oh, no, we do have third Lady Vice President. I'm sorry, Dr. Kuda, I see you. Sister Desiree Pearson, representing out of West Coast currently. Sister Ma'at, Brother Moyamal Kamal, legendary historian of the UNIA. Brother Orman, Elder Coordinator here at Division 421. And Sister Reverly, I'm sorry, of Division 421. Makes 14 total on the call. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And 8:22, we will proceed with the program. History of the course of African philosophy. Basically, we're just looking at, led from Mr. Garvey's standpoint up until his transition. We should know Mr. Garvey's transition date, June 10th, 1940. And when you look at a lot of the records, specifically UNIA papers, which we'll be looking at, Marcus Garvey UNIA papers by Robert Hill. When you look at the year of 1940, Mr. Garvey was primarily recovering from a stroke that occurred in January. And he was getting his strength back, but he overexerted himself a little bit. The doctor that helped him the first time in January had gone back to, well, had left the country, so he didn't have necessarily the support to recover the second time he had his stroke in June. So June, well, the year 1940, we should understand that a lot of that time Mr. Garvey was recovering. And what I see, 1939 was the last year of Mr. Garvey being able to lead from a healthy physically. So we look at the last few years, 1940, 1939, 1938, and specifically 1937. 1937 is the first year that Mr. Garvey started teaching, offering the course of African philosophy. We'll look at the length of the first year course in 1937, and then he taught another course in 1938, or successfully completed another course in 1938. To my knowledge, and the text will tell you that he was also preparing to announce graduating class for 1939, but that didn't happen. I forgot exactly why, but I don't think that was because he wasn't sick. He didn't get sick then. So, but we'll look at that. I think that's mentioned in the preface or the foreword. But the last 3 years of Mr. Garvey's life specifically is where the course of African philosophy comes from. And that's one thing that we should understand as we go into these lessons. This is the curriculum. How did I get to the curriculum already? All right, we're just going to go through it. So, curriculum, what to expect. This is what we are committing ourselves to. I know I am for the next few months, from October to March, specifically, based on the schedule, based on the time that it takes to get through each of the lessons from what we've done in the past. We'll be meeting every Tuesday. We take a week off. So 31st, we actually are planning to meet on New Year's Eve, but 7 days prior to that, I believe, is Christmas Eve. So we don't meet Christmas Eve, but we will be meeting New Year's Eve. So we get 1 week off for the next 6 months, but each week we will try to, we should be able to successfully go through at least one lesson, except for history. History is quite long. That usually takes 2 sessions. Questions, comments on the schedule and curriculum. So up until the end of March, we will have exams early April, April 5th, April 12th are the 2 Saturdays that we're reserving currently for exams. We've got April 1st. If we need a makeup day, April 1st, that Tuesday will serve as a makeup day. No questions on schedule. All right, everybody's on board. Okay. I'm gonna. I'll take care of it. I'll let y'all get the day off tonight. As we go into the next lessons, I will need some help with the reading, but tonight I'll take care of it because I don't think a lot of people don't know this information, so I'll do my best. So this information comes from UNIA, source Marcus Garvey, UNIA Papers, Volume 7. This is the official minutes of the Second Regional Conference, August 24th through 31st, 1937. So this would be what we know as our conventions. At this time, they were considered, or this was considered a second regional conference. In a text reads, the principal item emphasized, however, at the conference was the 5-year plan of the association by the International Convention of the Association at Kingston, Jamaica, 1934. So 1937 and 1934, those dates will come up in the course of African philosophy as well. The conference recorded its unanimous support of the 5-year plan and pledged its adherence to the schemes outlined as reread to them. So the key focus of 1937 International Convention, as the record says, was the support of the 5-year plan. 5-year plan is discussed in the course of African philosophy. Next paragraph, and again, this comes from page 755. Another feature of the conference was starting immediately, commencing the 1st of September, of a school of African philosophy to which students were admitted. These students were the first authorized trained representatives of the organization in the United States and Canada. The President General intimated to the conference that no official representatives outside of old presidents would be appointed who were not graduates of the school, that the school would recognize the degrees of the graduate, Bachelor of African Philosophy, Professor of African Philosophy, and Doctor of African Philosophy. To secure a doctor, a course of 3 years would be necessary following graduation, and a course of 2 years for professorship and 1 year for bachelor. But the second emphasis, or not necessarily the second emphasis, let me not say that, but it says another feature of the conference was starting immediately the course of African philosophy, in which Mr. Garvey was planning to teach a let's call it a new age of leadership. So that's what should be taken. One of the things that should be taken away from this reading. On the next page, it continues. Let me move some of this stuff around. I got these bars, excuse me. Mr. Garvey continues saying Mr. Garvey has the most complete knowledge of the organization and of the race and of other organizations, and that experience he knows is very expensive. Experience is most vital and important in the life of a race, nation, or the individual. Mr. Garvey continued by saying that he will not issue any more charters in the UNIA until the leaders are trained. So again, emphasizing a new era, new age of the UNIA. And Mr. Garvey actually uses those words, or paraphrasing Mr. Garvey's words. Unless the man who is to be president or the head can interpret the program of the UNIA correctly and work within the framework of the principles, no good could be achieved. You might have a high school education. It is an insult. You must have a high school education. It is an insult for ignorance to lead intelligence. Mr. Garvey in the course will speak to lessons from an unfortunate hindsight, but this is Mr. Garvey's attempt, as it said, if he could do things differently. That's where the course of African philosophy comes from. Mr. Garvey continued by saying the aims and objects, thoughts and ideas that are beneficial and good would be taught in the schooling for leadership. A certificate would be given to prove that the individual had completed the course of study to be a leader in the UNIA. This will cause people who have not the proper credentials to be detected and driven away from their imposition. There is a career in the UNIA now, and the UNIA will last as long as the race lasts. Mr. Garvey said he would be proud if there were a man who would be efficient to take over his work, a man who could be trusted, and a man that could correspond, the man that he could correspond with and know that the work is being carried on properly. Mr. Garvey said that he would like to retire and write literature and philosophy and such for the organization. So 1937, Mr. Garvey was preparing for retirement, as the text clearly says. I believe the 1938 convention was an election convention. So this was Mr. Garvey's attempt to prepare the next generation of leadership to take on the responsibilities of leadership of the race. Very, very clearly. 757, 758. Some divisions have gone so far from the Constitution, is what Mr. Garvey says. The right way is the only way to interpret a thing. We want to train men and women to work and carry on in the divisions when the President General is not there. We want someone who can explain the Constitution. We owe no international debt or obligations. Sorry, I got this little.
Well, let's go into this. So back in 1937, we talk about Marcus Garvey and what he was doing. And it goes again, dealing with the children, because the children are being violated with the Constitution right now, especially if they're not having the proper housing or protection that they need. That's why, again, it's imperative that we have the Odula. I know in Louisiana, they turned around and they have that prison down there in Angola. They have transported children that in juvenile detention home with grown men in Angola. Now, again, it's imperative, brothers and sisters, not only because of the Constitution, because it's also spiritually right. We can go back to my eye on, we have to what? Now, even on that King James Bible, it tells you that we have to protect the children. This is very serious on the growth of us as melanated, carbonated brothers and sisters, red, black, and green, race first.
Race first. Thank you, Sister Desiree. For context, when Mr. Garvey speaks of the Constitution, our understanding, he's speaking of the UNIA-ACL Constitution. We as leadership, we as representatives of the UNIA, we must be able to understand, interpret, and articulate the Constitution and how it functions. So he's speaking of the UNIA Constitution. But I must continue. Mr. Garvey says, we of the executive authority and the parent body have been satisfied with the little that you have contributed and tried to carry on. So Mr. Garvey speaking to the leadership, telling them, hey, we know we could do better, basically. I feel sure we have reached a better status from every point of view. We have lost nothing compared with what is necessary for the carrying on of movements of this kind. We have stirred up the sentiments of the whole world at a cheap price. The experience has been gained the world over. The experience that has been gained the world over has been very cheap indeed. Mr. Garvey continues, I am satisfied to know that I have done my duty. I want all of you to beat me doing this. This is with ability. That is with ability. So that when election time comes in the next convention, you may have the opportunity to give me a strong competition to run for president generalship. I want before the convention 100 Garveyites in the field to represent the organization intelligently. We are not going to dislodge the old presidents, those that have stayed in the midst of the hardest times. They will be vice presidents to the trained presidents sent to their divisions. So the School of African Philosophy was intended, as Mr. Garvey explains, to be a training ground for the leadership of the UNIA. Individuals, leaders would be, let's say, recruited, because Mr. Garvey didn't teach this to everyone, but they would be recruited to participate in the course of African philosophy. And as Mr. Garvey says in 1937, they were intended to go out and be the new presidents of divisions, and the sitting presidents would then be vice presidents. So if we were living in this time, if I was living in this time and I was not, selected to be a part of the course of African philosophy, Mr. Garvey could train someone and send them to Division 421. They would become the president because they have been trained in the right way per Mr. Garvey, and I would be relegated to a vice president. But again, a new era, a new vision.
Well, is it really a new era? Because it seems like we're constantly repeating history over again. I know we're studying it, whatever, but the thing is it really a new era? Because the same Dollar Tribe that our ancestors went through, we're supposed to grow and do further, right? So they put this into legislation or however law or whatever, and we have to push it further. So from 1937, we're in 2024, right? We are supposed to do more than our ancestors. They gave us everything we need, right? So we need to do more. And the first thing we need to do is save the babies.
Yes, ma'am, Sister Desiree. 838. So that is the UNIA papers. Some of the notes from Mr. Garvey from 1937. There's more information in regards to the course of African philosophy that you can find in 1938 as well, even through 1940, when Mr. Garvey transitioned. The course of African philosophy was one of the major documents that the leadership was trying to make sure was preserved and not lost.
Right.
In addition to philosophers and opinions, and many of the records, but this text was one of those texts. So, last thing we'll read is a speech that Mr. Garvey gave. I'll find it. Let me get it online. I don't want to show that one. Yeah, here we go. So, last thing we'll look at, and then we'll go straight into the preface and foreword. This is a speech that Mr. Garvey gave, I believe September 25th, 1937. This was published in the Black Man magazine, I believe the December issue. But we'll just look at I think it's the first paragraph. Yeah, I think it's the first paragraph. All right, yeah, we'll look at the first paragraph. It is indeed inspiring to see and to receive the welcome that you have given me in this church, in this remote city of our civilization. I come to you with as much gladness as you have come to see and listen to me. I may say, in short, that I am the same man you knew once. I haven't changed one bit, except probably in size, and that is because I am growing older. So, 1937, Mr. Garvey had just turned 50 years old in August of that year. I have just passed my 50th birthday, so I am much older than when I met you 15 years ago. And by the way, I went to jail from Detroit. I am here on the same serious business, and I want to talk to you tonight very seriously, as I've always tried to do, because the situation is very serious and very dangerous. He says, you know of the UNIA in the old days, particularly from 1918 to 1926. And that is a lot of what we talk about in regards to the UNIA and the history of the UNIA. That would be considered the height of the UNIA. Obviously, 1920 convention, but up until Mr. Garvey's incarceration, what was it, 1925? From that time period, we consider that the golden era of the UNIA. So Mr. Garvey says, you know of the UNIA in the old days, particularly 1918, 1926. You have followed its career. You know much about it because its propaganda was spreading far and wide. But probably you do not know of the real UNIA, which you are going to see, not only in the United States and Canada, but all over the world. Some of you thought the UNIA was a thing of the moment. The UNIA shall be as long as the race lives. So same thing that we read in the notes. The UNIA will be as long as the race lives. As long as the ages for the principles are fundamental. The principles are founded upon a rock which prejudice cannot wash away or destroy. I think it's in the second paragraph, what I was looking for. I'm just out, yeah, I think it is. I'm just out of a conference. So we just read the minutes of that conference, or some of the notes of that conference that he's speaking about, the 1937 Second Regional Conference. I'm just out of that conference of the same organization that has a program, which is the second stage in the mighty work of the movement. A stage you know nothing of. So he's talking about a second stage. I said new era, new age, but Mr. Garvey said that this is the second stage of the movement, a stage that no one knows of because it had never been spoken of. It never reached them. This is something that Mr. Garvey had just created the month prior. So how could you know about it? Those of you who thought the UNIA was dead or is dead may have a terrible mistake. It hasn't started to live its reality yet. So Mr. Garvey saying in 1937, everything that we've known and saw of the UNIA, Mr. Garvey is still saying the UNIA hasn't started to live its reality yet. Things have had to happen in the UNIA as to all movements of magnitude and significance as to the Church of Christ. It started on Calvary and had a hard time up there. The time that we are seeing in the UNIA is nothing compared to the time Christianity has had. Days of blood, days of torture, and crucifixion. Mr. Sherrill, so this is William Sherrill, who went on to become the third President General of the UNIA. Mr. Sherrill pointed out that I have been persecuted, but you will know that the real UNIA, but you will not know the real UNIA, excuse me, until thousands also can be named who have been persecuted for the cause of righteousness. The murders of the church are many, not only as Christ murdered. We cannot count the martyrs, for they are numberless. Some of us are a little cowardly. Otherwise, probably I would not be here tonight. But Mr. Sherrill told you how we have been trained. We have been out of our minds, not into our minds. So that's a very important concept. We have been out of our minds, not into our minds. Remember that when we talk about what was Mr. Garvey's intentions of the course of African philosophy. What was he trying to achieve? What was he trying to instill in the students of the course of African philosophy? Mr. Garvey, last couple lines. In fact, we are living for the convenience of other people. I am to send back to you in America in another short while, first group of men and women who will be able to interpret to you the real UNIA. So in this 1937 September speech, Mr. Garvey, following the completion of the first course of African philosophy, Mr. Garvey saying that he's creating a new group of leadership that can truly interpret the real UNIA. Okay. And with that, we will go into the preface and the foreword. A couple questions that you should keep in mind while we're going through this. And we'll review these questions again next week. So those that have taken this course, you're aware of the routine. Trying to share.
Any opportunity for a comment now, or you want to wait till later?
We can take comments now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention, that was a lot of important information that brought context to the course of African philosophy. I did want to make correction. Mr. Sherrill was actually the fourth person elected president general. Actually, Harvey beat him to it for 2 years, and then he took over for 6. And then Harvey took it over again. And before Stewart was the first successor to Mr. Garvey. But yeah, that was an important epic. It was where Mr. Garvey actually used, at least on one occasion, that the UNIA was going into a new epic or a new part of our story. And that the emphasis was going away from the quantity of membership into the quality of membership.
Sure.
Of course, the African Communities League was somewhat of an Africa town or Africa industrial, political, social, cultural, spiritual, independent community that was operating all over the globe and invariably forming an empire. So he wanted leaders, of course, of the UNIA to begin to rise and replicate some of the greatness that he had performed himself. So he also mentioned about, having the race of Marcus Garvey personified for people who were equipped to lead on the level of capacity he was. So it was an important period. The new epic, had a lot to do with politics. Of course, it went through the Great Depression, and Mr. Garvey accurately predicted World War or European War II, up to within a year of the actual, kicking off of the World War. And in fact, when he passed in 1940, he shared the front page of I forgot what newspaper that was, Chicago Defender. Front page was that England at first got bombed by Germany, and the part of that front page was England, was bombed. Another part was Marcus Garvey was, passed away. So, but yeah, it was a lot. Someone else talking.
1 second.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Brother Moima. You can finish.
Yeah, so it was a lot going on at that time. So this transition period that he was talking about, and he did some nice interviews that you could probably add to that to give context to. Helps prepare the way for this new generation of leadership, the young Turks, they used to call them, who were up and rising, and quite a few of them, unfortunately, didn't get to live for so long after that. One in particular I'm thinking about, who was a commissioner at the time, was one of Dr. Clark's mentors. Name escapes me right now. But anyway, it was a lot of people who were, younger, who were born and raised in the organization, and who were active leaders who were prepared to take an accelerated course because they've demonstrated their aptitude and their character, and serving the association faithfully. Some of them up through the juvenile ranks, etc. So this was a exciting new era he was preparing us for, and I'll just yield that thought there.
Thank you, Brother Moy. You reaffirm my understandings with the sentiment of quality over quantity. But as we understand it, Mr. Garvey was trying to, in a lack of a better sense of terms, replicate himself. Duplicate within others the success that he was able to execute. So that's you confirm my understanding. Mama Mina, you had a comment?
No.
Well, we're gonna go into my comment. So the thing is that everything that Marcus Garvey was speaking of is still prevalent today, right? Of everything that our children, our families, and everything is going up against. It's a sad thing to say that we're not doing actually everything that we are supposed to do. Not even in the church now, because you have to remember, it was the Black church. I'm not talking about the church that was under the Vatican. I'm talking about the Black church that sat up there and organized on their own to fight for their family, their children, right? Before they became a part of the Vatican. That goes with them mega churches and everything else, right? And we was there. We the Black church, the deacons and all of them that everybody talks about was there. They were the revolutionaries. I don't know what transpired in between time. I tell you what I say. It's about capitalism. It's about the fact that you will sell your soul and take away from your brothers and sisters in order to have a Rolls Royce, right?
No, that
Someone
wouldn't have
don't even have shoes or whatever on their feet. You understand what I'm saying? So the thing is that the same things that Marcus Garvey was talking about then, we're going through now. Why are we still going through the same things? We are not listening to our elders. We are not doing what we are supposed to do as brothers and sisters. We are not. Because why do we have to keep on repeating the history that they gave us the format in order to do what we're supposed to do? Just like they sit around and they talk about Malcolm X. When people talk about Malcolm X, right? They said, oh, he was with a white girl. He was this, and he on Nation Islam. They don't even know that Malcolm X grew up. His mother and father, he was Malcolm Little in the UNIA.
His mother and father were in the UNIA. That's right. That's right.
UNIA. He was not illiterate when he went to jail. He was not. He grew up in that. They killed his family.
Yep.
And we constantly have to. So, brothers and sisters, it's something that we are doing wrong because we have the platform. We have the foundation. What are we doing wrong that we have to constantly repeat over and over again and not growing?
Thank you, Sister Desiree. understand what you're saying. The other side of what you're saying, though, as you say, we're constantly speaking on bringing up the same history. I feel that that is important. And one main reason is because we constantly are bringing new life into our organization, into
That's right. Do
the
life.
community. When we think about, elementary.
I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with bringing history because our children have to learn about their ancestors. I'm just saying,
Okay.
us as elders, look at us. I'm 54. I'll be 54 in December. President John, I don't know how old you are, but I'm just saying that I'm talking about the ones that's older. We have to do something more. Of course, we
But
have
listen,
to constantly recognize our ancestors always and forever. But I'm just saying, what are we gonna do as far as our age group in order to create change and do more? Because we know the information. How do we implement that information and actually create change?
Yes, Sister Desiree, that would be, we got a couple of our elders, Mama Mina, Brother Orman, have both served in
that's right, because I'm a whole 77. I'm a
Yeah.
whole 77. I've been around into nationalism since the 60s. But even before that, had to have been my grandparents who were Garveyites, you understand? But for time and circumstances, after we fought for the rights with the UNIA, what happened? Then came the civil rights movement. That was the uh, the change of the 60s that they fought for. After which went back to Black nationalism again. So time and circumstance and change. Change creates change. And so people went through the Garvey movement, and that's early 1900. But in the middle of the century, in the 60s, they, fighting for civil rights. Thereafter, fighting for, Black power again. So time and circumstance creates changes, and each of those
Yeah, we
changes
have change every day. Change goes on. That's
change
nature.
creates change.
So
Change
the
creates change
world
without a doubt.
evolves. We have change. So that means that we're gonna have to go. What? We're gonna have to be out there on the ground, and that means we need to be in these communities, and
But
we're
you have
gonna
to
have to
understand, and
create the change.
you understand too that once they fought for civil rights, that was Du Bois. That was opposite. He was opposed to the
W. Du
Garvey
Bois.
movement. You
Look, you got
understand?
W.
So,
Du Bois,
you know,
Steve
time
Washington.
circumstances
One
and
saying trade, one
this.
saying or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
No, one thing, let's integrate with these white folks. And the other was that we're gonna develop
Yeah,
Black people. You
exactly.
understand
But
the difference
so
in those
it was
leadership.
a
Difference in
realization
the
of the
leaders.
truth. Because there's a yin and a yang on both of it, and it's a realization of the truth. We did need a W. Du Bois aspect, and we did need Booker T's Washington aspect. But what are we doing right now in the present time? We have to focus on, our ancestors are here. They didn't gave us the power. They didn't gave us so much power that we can speak it as this. They gave us so much power that you got this technology on here now that we can all be on this screen. Let me tell you something. It's time for us as a unit to stop disrespecting our ancestors altogether and take that knowledge they gave and actually put it in place. We are supposed to be so equipped and so knowledgeable that we can utilize stuff that our ancestors gave us and push it through to what's going on right now.
Sister Desiree, that is exactly what we are trying to do with Message to the People. This is the teachings from my ancestor, Marcus Garvey, on how we can carry on the work of the UNIA.
Okay, the one thing is that we're gonna have to start going up in houses. And I know brothers and sisters don't want to do it. We ain't know what do you call them jokers to be standing on the corner. I don't know. What do you call them? But anyway, so the thing is, we're going to have to start going up in houses.
Yes, yes, Sister Desiree. With this course helps us understand what to say when we are going into people's houses, how to promote kindness, promote charity, support our brothers and sisters. This course teaches us what to say in those situations and what to do.
Exactly. We ain't no, that's what I'm talking about, Jehovah's Witness. We ain't no Jehovah's Witness. We the UNIA, we red, black, and green. We've been out here from the beginning of time. We have to stop being so passive. It's time to be passive aggressive. And that also goes with truth.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sister Desiree. It's 9 o'clock. I'm probably gonna need a little bit more time. It's gonna take us through 9:30, but I would like to get through Preface and the Foreword tonight. Some questions to consider as we go through the foreword and the preface, especially officers and leaders. How many aims and objects of the UNIA are there, or how many aims and objects are there in the UNIA? And also leadership, we should consider that with the amendments to our UNIA Constitution, do we still currently have the same number of aims and objects? But that's something to consider. Two, what members of the UNIA was this quote unquote course of African philosophy created for? Who was this course intended for? Which branch or division of the UNIA was responsible for establishing training departments? What was the name of the UNIA school established in Claremont, Virginia in 1926? That's just a bonus question. What year was the first School of African Philosophy taught? You should already know that from what we went over already. How many students were in the first class? Another question that we ask internally, how many graduates were there in the first class? 7, which student was considered the leader of the first class? The text says that this individual got the highest grade. Why was this leader of the class the best student? Why were they hesitant to enroll in the course? What was the School of African Philosophy? What was the schedule of the courses? What was the schedule of the courses taught by Garvey? How many days and how often per day? Basically, we should know the commitment, the sacrifices that our ancestors were willing to make. And as Brother Moriamal mentioned, this was I forgot the word that you mentioned, not a condensed, I don't know if it was condensed or it was a condensed version or accelerated course. I think that's the way we put it. So, but we should know the schedule of the 37 course as well as the schedule of the 1938 course. Who was appointed the authentic historian of the life and works of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and who appointed that individual? Who owns this course of African philosophy? Who does the course of African philosophy belong to? So those are some questions. See, my connection was unstable. Those are some questions for the foreword. For the preface, some questions to consider. What compilation of work is considered the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote? Number 2, what does the course of African philosophy represent? What does the course of African philosophy represent? In the editor's opinion, so from the editor's standpoint, what does the course of African philosophy represent? The years of Garvey's birth and death, and a bonus is the exact dates of Mr. Garvey's birth and death or transition. What years was Mr. Garvey in the United States? So we know of the great legacy of Mr. Garvey in the UNIA, but and most of that legacy comes from his time in the United States. But what were the exact years and how long exactly was Mr. Garvey in the United States? How much time did he have to establish this legacy that we still honor over 100 years later? When and where was the UNIA founded as an organization? How does the editor describe what the course of African philosophy is? So these questions are similar. What does it represent? How does the editor describe what it is? But from a exam standpoint, if you flop those two, you wouldn't necessarily get it wrong. It's just an understanding of the different perspectives and the depth of the description of what this text is. If Garvey could live his life over, what would he change in regards to relationships with other people or with other individuals, or as he's organizing? Let me turn my camera on, and I may have to turn that off if my internet slows down. What was the immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy? So that's described in the text as well. Number 9, what was the requirements to pass the course taught by Garvey? How many lessons or subjects were there total in the course of African philosophy, and what was the difference in the type of lessons, or what do we know about the difference in those lessons? What was Garvey's beliefs? What was Mr. Garvey's beliefs about the course? How did Mr. Garvey himself describe the course? How has the white man built up his system of superiority, according to Mr. Garvey? What was Mr. Garvey's view on Karl Marx and communism? What was Mr. Garvey's view on Jews? And last question, what was Mr. Garvey's position on the majority of Negroes, and how should we address that position? So how should we address our brothers and sisters as we encounter them? Those are questions to keep in mind as we that's something else. As we go into the reading. Any questions or comments before we start the reading for tonight?
Yes, I have a comment. I want to know, because I have my brothers and sisters in there, UNIA. How do y'all feel about when Marcus Garvey decided that he wanted to have a meeting with the KKK?
We understand that to be
Do you think he was wrong? Do you think he was right? How do you think that he did that? Why? And I just want to know from other brothers and sisters in UNIA, because Marcus Garvey put it out there. He said, "Yeah, I want to sit down with you." How do brothers and sisters feel about that?
Sister Desiree, for these trainings, we really have to stay focused on the topic. That question is off topic. From my position in leadership, that was a diplomatic position that Mr. Garvey took. And I have no disagreement in his position. But again, tonight.
That's right. I don't disagree either. That's right, Brother John, or President John. I agree with you too. That's right. I agree with him 100% on that move. All right, sounds good.
It's when we are a body, we are a nation. When nations are in conflict with other nations, there are times when the leadership must sit down and have discussions. And that is exactly the situation and the time that Mr. Garvey was experiencing. Our people were literally at war, fighting and literally killing one another between the UNIA and the KKK. So that was a diplomatic meeting, per my understanding. Brother Moriamal, you want a brief comment on that?
I actually I would agree with what you said on topic, but yeah, it was a diplomatic attempt to dissolve, and he was interviewed by the KKK. He didn't call the meeting, but while he was in Atlanta, they invited him to explain to them what the aims and objects of his association was, so they can understand their relationship or how they should perceive the UNIA, because they had mixed signals from other rival camps that were trying to, misrepresent the UNIA. So that was what that was about. But yeah, we can get into that at some later point, maybe in the subject of diplomacy.
Yes. That's a great suggestion, Brother Moyamal. Officers, I got any volunteer officers that can help me with the reading tonight, that can take care of the foreword?
I'll help you with the reading. Where's the reading at, brother? You talking about with the forward? I'll do it.
Thank you, Sister Desiree.
If nobody wants to respond, I'll do it.
Leadership has to be done by example. Thank you, Sister Desiree. Officers, we got to step up. We got to be ready.
Yeah, but I can't, for some reason, it's not pulling it up.
If you got any issues,
how do I get it up? Yeah, for some reason my computer is not pulling it up.
Okay.
Everything.
Desiree, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. Again, next week.
All right, it says the Honorable Charles L. James, President General. It says, in keeping with the constitutional provision and the aims and objects of the Universal Negro Improvement Association to establish schools and colleges for the racial education of our race, the founder of our first President General of the UNIA, Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, made several attempts to educate some and re-educate others who would be charged with the responsibility of leadership in the UNIA. He sincerely felt that no one should be held responsible for his action unless he or she is educated or trained to perform those responsibilities. And since the UNIA had become the largest responsible movement of the racial history, its leadership should be thoroughly informed so that the proper information would be dispersed. Marcus Garvey was a man of vision. Therefore, his students had to be visionaries. That's very evident, in education, you're teaching the school system. It's very important to be a visionary. In every branch of the association, training departments were established. This included the military training for nurses, and programs for juveniles. We recall under his direction, a university was established in Claremont, Virginia in 1926. Smallwood Quarry Industrial Institute was renamed Liberty University. Students came from various sections to enroll in the first venture. Your humble servant. Back now. What's this name? All right. All right. Your humble students came from various sections to enroll in the first venture to humble servant of one of the first trustees. The success and failure of the great educational attempt in the matter of history. Now, this is another point that I want to bring up about Marcus Garvey, and that goes back to Angola and Louisiana, what they did to the children. Okay. Many attempts were aborted, but the idea lived through the forums, mass meetings, group discussion, lectures, books, and pamphlets. Mr. Garvey's speeches were widely circulated for the radical education and culture of the people. In 1937,
racial education.
Huh?
The racial education. You said radical. I had to clear that up.
Oh, racial. Okay, sorry. Racial education and culture of the people. In 1937, after the extensive European tour and the establishment of the parent body in London, England, the founder called the regional conference of 355 colleges, senatorial Canada, had to conslave. He selected the following officers of divisions who, in his judgment, were qualified to give him the nucleus of creating what he proudly named the School of African Philosophy. Oh my God, do you not know what we are a part of, brothers and sisters? Is this not beautiful? Oh my goodness. I'm thinking I'm having an OG right now. Just alone with Marcus Garvey. We have responsibilities to do, brothers and sisters. And it's up to us through our racial, not radical. Well, we need to do both. Racial, radical, right? Everything that goes on within our families, everything that goes on in the school system, everything that goes on, whatever. We have a responsibility, not only being a part of the UNIA, we have a responsibility to our ancestors. And we do. We have to continue the fight. And I mean that we got to get dark and dirty, right? Because you already know they're doing rituals on.
Desiree.
But anyway, I will tell you about that later, because let me tell you, them Caucasians is doing rituals. They are. They're doing rituals. They're doing rituals. Dr. Valentine talked about it. They're doing rituals. But anyway.
You want me to finish it?
Oh yeah, let's talk about the rituals. First of all,
no, Sister Desiree, the reading.
Oh, okay, yes. Students of the first class were followers of Arthur Clement Moore, Toronto, Canada, Charles Lionel James, Gary, Indiana. Wow, Gary, Indiana. Okay. James R. Stewart of Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. And Thomas W. Harvey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which the brothers gave it to him with that Tea Party, because Pennsylvania was actually supposed to be the capital. But anyway, that's another story. All right, so Nathaniel Grissom, Chicago, Illinois. Yeah, Chi-Town. And we go back to Philadelphia. Sarah Rachel Isaac and Ethel Waddell, Chicago, and Chicago again. Teresa Young in Cincinnati, Ohio.
You can't skip over our sister Eleanor White.
Eleanor White, Chicago, Illinois. Yes, 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 yes. Teresa E. Young, Cincinnati, Ohio. Abraham R. Roberts of Toronto, Canada. Yes, don't forget they washed our feet over there. As the names were called, I had the qualifications required, but my ego told me that I had been an office boy in the parent body. I had shunned Marcus Garvey's shoes. I've traveled short distance with him. I've heard all of his speeches since 1923. I had attended all the conventions since that time. I had visited him in prison, and I had become the youngest vice president in the famous New York local with over 40,000 members. I had been appointed by him president of Newark, New Jersey, yes, Newark Division, and the state as the commissioner of New Jersey. And now, as president of Gary, Indiana Division, I felt that I knew it all and that Mr. Garvey's time could be better spent on someone else. Wow. To my surprise, I had the rudest awakening of my life. Wow. Mr. Garvey shocked me. He said to me publicly, James, you don't know. I know that you don't know because I have not taught you, and you will not take the course of African philosophy.
You will take the course.
And you will take the course of African philosophy, so that when you say, I know, who will know that you know, because you will have been taught from me. From then on, there is no question. I enlisted for duration. This is deep. All right, let's go on. The class became one family. We ate together, roomed together, studied together, recognizing the professor and the chief architect in the intellectual destiny. As for me, it was a dose of humility mixed with the yearning for knowledge for 30 days and nights. And isn't that how long Jesus, Yahshua, meditated on a mountain 30 days and 30 nights. For 30 days and nights, with session per day, mass meeting 8 p.m., studying until early morning hours. We had no time for anything else but study, study, study. Then finally came gratification. Let the record show that I received the highest grade. Huh?
That was graduation.
Graduation. All right, Brother John. Thank you, brother. At the highest grade in every point of examination. What? I was graded E. Oh my God. Go ahead and finish, Brother John.
All right. It continues. My classmates all agreed that I was a leader of the first class at the School of African Philosophy. We were charged with guarding the written course with our lives. The unwritten course was also to be engraved on the tablets of our memory. As I write this foreword, I am sorry to announce that all my classmates of the first class have joined with the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey and our other ancestors. With all our human frailties, I am convinced that the first class has not failed our teacher, and that we have been a shining example to those who come after us. This course is ours, whatever is written, distorted, and injected by unauthorized persons using devices other than the proper way that was given to us by the founder, and applying their benefits to their own personal benefit. Please understand that, quote, there is a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own, end quote. As the only surviving graduate of the first class, it is important for me to protect the interests of those who preceded me into eternity. And knowing that there are forces that are trying to distort history, I hereby authorize Dr. Tony Martin, who has been recognized and appointed the authentic historian on the life and works of the Honorable Marcus Garvey by the Universal Negro Improvement Association in convention, to publish the written document with the understanding that the right be preserved for future generations, which is the charge of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, founder. Let me hope that into whomsoever's hands these lessons fall, that they may use them wisely. For in these lessons there is eternal life for Africans at home and abroad, and that they testify to God's greatest gift to our race in the person of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Proclaim it to the world, Africa to the Africans at home and abroad. So that is the foreword, and we'll go straight into the preface. But we should know that the foreword was written by Honorable Charles L. James. Preface written by Honorable Dr. Tony Martin. So preface. The Course of African Philosophy is a unique document. With the exception of his poetical works, it is the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote. Yet, 46 years after his death, it is being published here for the first time. It represents, as it were, the last political will and testament of a man who stands without equal in the history of the worldwide mobilization of African peoples. For Marcus Garvey did not merely organize the most massive Black movement in the history of the United States of America, he also organized the most successful movement among African peoples in the Caribbean area. In fact, as a serious pan-Caribbean movement cutting across political and linguistic barriers, Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association has no serious challenger. Garvey's organization has an equally singular record in Africa, where it established itself oblivious of political and linguistic barriers in the European colonies of England, France, Belgium, and Portugal, as well as in the independent state of Liberia and the racist state of South Africa. In Central America, too, the UNIA spread with great rapidity from Mexico to Panama. In Canada, it entrenched itself coast to coast from British Columbia to Nova Scotia. Scattered Africa fell within Garvey's organizational genius in every far-flung corner, whether Brazil, Australia, or Barry Docks, Wales. Garvey lived from 1887 to 1940. His years of all-encompassing triumph coincided with his sojourn in the United States from 1916 to 1927. His immigration to that country was, however, preceded by many long years of preparation for his life's work, long years of study, travel, and organizational work, culminating in the founding of the Universal Negro Improvement Association in his Jamaican homeland in 1914. After his expulsion from the United States in 1927, Garvey's organization underwent a long and slow decline as the chief struggled to uphold together his fragmenting colossus from inadequate headquarters in Jamaica and later in England. It was in 1937, 10 years after his deportation from the United States, 2 years after relocating to England, and 3 years before his death, that Garvey introduced his Course of African Philosophy. This was nothing less than the distillation of a lifetime of organizational experience. It contained a mixture of techniques he himself had utilized to achieve success and an attempt to incorporate the hard lessons he had learned with the benefit of an unfortunate hindsight. Much of the Machiavellian quality of the document comes from this latter consideration. Garvey had experienced in a painful way the treacherous potential enveloped within human nature. If he had his life to live over, he seemed to be saying his would be a less trusting, a more cautious approach to people. The immediate purpose of the Course of African Philosophy was to train a cadre of UNIA leaders who would carry on the great work of the organization after Garvey's death. Garvey designed the 22 lessons in London and took them to Canada, where from August 24th to 31st, 1937, he conducted a regional conference for North American members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Garvey's initial vehicle for imparting his accumulated experience was the School of African Philosophy, which met immediately after the conference. For most of the month of September 1937, Garvey trained a select group of UNIA organizers from the North American field. They spent 12 or more hours together every day. They listened to Garvey's lectures, ate together, did their homework together. During the course of the month, each student was required to write out each lesson in their own handwriting. The course described by Garvey as, quote, a most rigid system of training, end quote, covered over 42 subjects. Much of it remained unwritten, for it was in the nature of a confidential in-house affair. Even the 22 written lessons reproduced here were guarded jealously from indiscriminate circulation. So, Garvey's overriding concern was to develop within his organizers a fierce Afrocentric view of the world. He accepted as given the fact that the white race had imposed its viewpoint on the world, and he thought that African people would have to adopt similar strategies in their own behalf. The race first position would tolerate no permanent allies from among other groups. Whites were to be manipulated where possible, but their propaganda was to be avoided and counteracted. Under no circumstances were they to obtain positions of influence or control over Black organizations. The course, reported the Boston Chronicles after an interview with Garvey, would instill, quote unquote, an independent outlook, a philosophy entirely Negroid, void of anything that will subjugate the mind of the Negro. In the context of a confidential conclave with his lifetime of experience behind him, Garvey would be much less guarded in his speech and than would have been the case otherwise. That's a very important point, but we will touch on that more next week. Wow.
Well, you covered a whole bunch of points. Actually, when you go back, and you talk about how Marcus Garvey would sit there and say that what it would be now, and that goes back into what I was saying, that we need to go further. But I think that because of what they did to him when he got transported from the United States back to Jamaica,
Deported.
Deported, yes. And And that's something that we have to look at, brothers and sisters, because, when he was here, it was good, And then on top of that, even when it comes to the Moorish Science Temple, because I am a Bay, and they say about the Negro or whatever, but you have to understand that Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali worked hand in hand. Matter of fact, when they open up the prayer, they have to give a greeting to Marcus Garvey. You know what I'm saying? In the Moorish Science Temple. So we have power, brothers and sisters. We need to implement it more.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sister Desiree. We're almost finished, but again, important point that we just read, which I tried to reinforce. Again, this is not Mr. Garvey in his 30s and 40s. This is Mr. Garvey. He just turned 50. And unfortunately, Mr. Garvey was only able to live, I believe, to 52. He didn't quite make it to 53. But
Wow.
this is Mr. Garvey later in his life. And as the text says, in the context of a confidential conclave with his lifetime of experience behind him, Garvey could be much less guarded in his speech than would have been the case otherwise. So this is a mature perspective of Garvey, and I would argue the most mature perspective of Garvey that we have available. We love all of the texts of Garvey, the selected writings and speeches, philosophies and opinions. But when it comes to a complete compilation of work directly from the hands of Mr. Garvey, there's nothing that touches Course of African Philosophy.
Right.
This is Mr. Garvey at the age of 50, able to look back on his successes, his triumphs, as well as his obstacles, the deportation, relocating from Jamaica to England. But just being able to look back, the Black Star Line, organizing millions. This is him finally having time to sit down and think and put, words to lessons as to how he would train future leaders.
Right.
Let me finish up. While forcefully attempting to lead his people out of the domination of the white group, he would cordially, frankly admire their methods. Whites knew exactly what they wanted, and in the final analysis, subordinated much else to their pursuit of racial self-interest. Garvey says, quote, never swallow wholly what the white man writes or says without first critically analyzing it, end quote. He teaches in lesson 1. But this did not mean that the African race should eschew the white group's methods. Mr. Garvey says, quote, things that may not be true, end quote. He suggested in the same lesson, quote, can be so if you repeat them long and often enough. Therefore, always repeat statements that will give your race status and an advantage. That is how the white man has built up his system of superiority, end quote. Garvey, in his heyday, had to contend with white self-interest and opportunism from both right and left. He simultaneously praised Lenin and Trotsky for their work in the Soviet Union and resisted the unprincipled attempts of the Communist Party of the USA to bore from within his organization. Here, the Course of African Philosophy, he presented his students with a rare evaluation of Karl Marx. Communism, Mr. Garvey said, was founded principally on the theory of Karl Marx, who knew very little about Negroes and who taught and wrote less about them. It seeks to put government, so communism seeks to put government in the hands of an ignorant white mass who have not been able to destroy their natural prejudices towards Negroes and other non-white people, end quote. On the question of Jews, as on the question of communists, Garvey's race-first position led him to a duality of attitude. In traditional Afro-American vein, he praised the Jews for for their group solidarity and resented their positions of influence and power in certain economic and political aspects of Black life. He himself had come into business contact with Jews at various times, and with both good and bad results. He showed considerable pique during his trial in alleged mail fraud in 1923, where the presiding judge, Julian Mack, happened to be an important figure in North American Zionism. For the most part, there should be.
It goes with that mail fraud. Don't forget, at the same time that they try to get him for mail fraud, they try to get Noble Drew Ali on a charge saying he was sleeping with little girls, and we already know all that was false information.
Thanks, Desiree. Let me finish up. We're making good on time. We should have some time for discussion. For the most part, there should be few surprises in these lessons for those already familiar with Garvey's ideology. What we find here is the standard fare of race first, whether in religion, literature, historical studies, intergroup relations, or in any other area. Self-reliance and nationhood. What is new and fascinating is the tone of many of these utterances, coming as they do near the end of his life and in a confidential setting. So, in this confidential setting, Mr. Garvey later in his life, his tone towards his people has changed. Equally new in emphasis, though not in substance, is his insistent advocacy of discipline. Garvey emerges here beneath the flamboyance usually associated with his name, beneath the genius for organizing, beneath the oratorical eloquence for which he was legendary as an advocate of hard work, singleness of purpose, and self-discipline. The leader must strive to master his shortcomings, he says. The race must strive for excellence. The greatest men and women in the world burn the midnight lamp, end quote. Nor does he spare the lazy and unmotivated within his own group. Like a Booker T. Washington or Malcolm X or Elijah Muhammad, Garvey was not one to cover up the shortcomings of his own people. He says, quote, the majority of Negroes are ignorant, end quote, he says in lesson 21, but the intent, as always, is positive. Quote, as other people were willing to sacrifice their time and even their lives to Christianize our race, so we must exercise patience and time to civilize our people, end quote. Garvey cannot, any more than anyone else, escape totally from the confines of his time. There is much assorted homely advice on diet, grooming, and love, among other things. Some of this is timeless, but some dates and passé from the perspective of 4 decades later. So for us, 8 decades later, the lessons are not within their unexpected asides of dry humor either. Mr. Garvey says, quote, never try to make a speech on a hungry stomach, end quote, he warns. He says, quote, you may faint and die before you are finished, end quote. The first course of African philosophy was followed by examinations held on September 23rd, 1937. 10 students were successful. They were Arthur C. Moore of Toronto, Charles L. James of Gary, Indiana, James R. Stewart of Cleveland, Ohio, Thomas W. Harvey of Philadelphia, Nathaniel Grissom of Chicago, Miss Sarah Richard Isaacs of Philadelphia, Miss Ethel Waddell of Chicago, Miss Teresa E. Young of Cincinnati, Miss Eleanor White of Chicago, and Abraham R. Roberts of Toronto. Joseph L. Gray of Charleston, Missouri, quote, did not graduate but was continued as a student, end quote. This first group of graduates was immediately sent out as UNIA commissioners to the North American field. Some of them in due course instructed classes in the course of African philosophy. CL, that's Charles L. James, taught the course in Gary, St. Louis, and New Orleans. James Stewart offered the course in Cleveland. 3 of the 10, Stewart, Harvey, and James, in turn occupied the organization's highest post, that of President General. So 3 of the students of the first class went on to become President Generals after Mr. Garvey's transition in 1940. In 1938, Garvey introduced the lessons as a correspondence course. So 1938 was the second course. In this course, he taught the course of African philosophy as a correspondence course from his London headquarters. So through mail, most likely, or presumably in 1938. His Black Man magazine published the names of 7 graduates in its June 1939 number. So all right, yeah. So in 38, those individuals graduated in 39. And then he was teaching a class in 39, but obviously, due to his health, he wasn't able to complete that class and have the graduates for 1940. 4 of the class of 1939 were from the United States, one each from with 1 each from Nigeria, Uganda, and South Africa. They were Benjamin W. Joseph of Philadelphia, J.O. Nwanolu of Onitsha, Nigeria, Mrs. H.T. McNary of Detroit, D.S. Masuke of Kampala, Uganda, Miss Keturah Paul of New York City, H. Ilatintro of Cape Province, South Africa, and Miss E.M. Collins of New York City. Names of additional graduates were promised for the next issue of Black Man, but no further issues were published. Garvey died the following year on June 10th, 1940. School of African Philosophy came at the end of many years of UNIA efforts in the field of education. The organization's original aims and objects in 1940 included the establishment of educational institutions. Garvey's trip to the United States in 1916 was intended initially as a fundraising tour for the UNIA's projected agricultural and industrial school in Jamaica. At various times during the 1920s, the organization ran a Booker T. Washington University in Harlem, New York, a Liberty University in Claremont, Virginia, and in-service courses for UNIA civil servants. Branches in several countries ran elementary and secondary schools. Famous educators and scholars such as Hubert H. Harrison, J.A. Rogers, Carter G. Woodson, and many others were associated with the organization at one time or another. 1 second. I gotta go off the computer for the finishing. School. Okay. Woodson and many more were associated with the organization at one time or another. UNIA schools had always had the same ultimate purpose. So the purpose of the School of African Philosophy, or these schools, namely the presentation of an Afrocentric perspective. The School of African Philosophy had itself been in the making from as early as 1934. In that year, the UNIA's 7th International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World. So again, 1934, we read about that in the UNIA papers when we started talking. The 7th International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World meeting in Kingston, Jamaica, authorized the establishment of, quote, college for the purpose of training leaders who are to supervise the work in different parts of the world, end quote. Intelligence, quote unquote, intelligence, said Garvey in the course of African philosophy, rules the world, and ignorance carries the burden. The intelligence of which he spoke was not merely book learning, but the self-interested common sense which the race seemed to lack. He expressed it this way in a fictitious father-son dialogue in 1935. He said, quote, education, boy, is a mighty force. It is the weapon of human control. If you can educate a people in an idea you have, they will react to your satisfaction, whether education is a propaganda is right or wrong, end quote. Last paragraph. It is fitting that the UNIA's last educational endeavor in Garvey's lifetime should have been the first that he himself was able to conduct from start to finish. It says, quote, I have given them all I know, end quote, he declared to the people of Detroit in 1937. So when we looked at the letter to the people in Detroit in 1937, that's what this is speaking of. There's a couple quotes in that speech that he gave to the people of Detroit. He was actually in Ontario, but due to the fact that he was not allowed to come into the United States, that was a city that was close enough to allow brothers and sisters in the United States, specifically Detroit, to be able to still support him and see him. So he was speaking to the people of Detroit, but he was in Ontario. In the last quote, he said, quote, "I am trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified," end quote. And that ends the preface written by Tony Martin, November 10th, 1985.
Right. I got a lot of comments on that one.
I know you.
What, you think we don't? Yes.
Yeah. Now,
Go ahead, Brother Moore.
I could go for 2 hours on that whole little piece alone, but I'm gonna try to keep it short because there's a lot of history in there.
Are we talking about the preface, the foreword, or both of them?
Both.
Okay, go ahead.
Both are a 2-hour lesson easy, but a lot in it. Now, first of all, the foreword or the Mr. James, Honorable Charles L. James is he did the preface, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
foreword.
I mix that up all the time.
Yeah. Now, his preface again, he stated that he was the #1 scoring student.
He did.
Honorable James Robert Stewart's daughters, he was the #1 student, and that's why he won the office as President General after Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
So that's been a long running debate. But of course, Mr. James, being the last living student, got the bully pulpit, so he got to put himself in as #1. I was going to say, secondly, if you notice, the reason why they rushed to produce or to print what was once a private document or a confidential training course, the reason that Mr. James authorized Tony Martin to publish his lessons that he gave him is because Robert Hill had went to Liberia and met with the Stewart family. And James Robert Stewart, who was one of the graduates of the course, and normally the graduates in their initials with GSAP, for Graduate Student of African Philosophy. But anyway, the Honorable James R. Stewart, GSAP, was he had his lessons in the collection of things that they gave Robert Hill, along with some photographs and other things about the history of the movement. So he took those back to the U.S., and it was right before the centennial Marcus Garvey coming. So he wanted to produce those, for the centennial, and along with some other rare writings of Mr. Garvey from the Black Man magazine. So when Mr. James and others found out that he had the course, so that he wouldn't distort it and possibly misrepresent it, they decided to, put out Mr. James's course. Now, these lessons were written by the students themselves. However, if you look at the student of the course that Mr. James has and the course that Mr. Stewart had, was two different courses. And so it wasn't an exact wording. It's some would think, to the course. So anyway, that's something to analyze and compare. Also, going back, there's a lot of things in there, man. Now, technically, 3 students of the course did become President General, but one of the students of the course actually had an outgrowth UNIA in 1949. The UNIA 1949 of the world, that people don't know much about. But actually, a 4th student, Eleanor White, became President General of the UNIA 1949 of the world, which is separated from the UNIA Rehabilitating Committee, which is separate from the UNIA 1929, which were all operating at the same time for one period, with Mr. Stewart as President General. At that time, it was the auditor, former Solicitor General was the chair of the Rehabilitating Committee, and then you had Eleanor White was the president of the UNA 1949, along with Charles L. James as a second assistant, and Nathaniel Grissom was the first assistant, former commissioner of Wisconsin. So anyway, it was a lot of those people in that first class in that photograph. Teresa Young later became Secretary General. Ethel Waddell, I forgot what office she served, but the Sarah Isaacs was commissioner in Philadelphia until she died in the 1980s, right before Mr. James. But all of these, people mentioned, as well as Arthur Clement Moore, who was commissioner in Canada. I'm not so much sure about Abraham Roberts, but all these people were graduates, and these are two of the second class. Ethel Collins was a longtime Secretary General of the UNIA, and she was a close confidant of Amy Jakes Garvey, along with Thomas W. Harvey. But also the Benjamin W. Jones, who was one of the heads of the Garvey Club, and he was vice president of the Philly division, and he was super active with the Garvey Club. Later became the Universal African Nationalist Movement. So anyway, he was politically quite active. But we got images, photos, histories of all these graduates. These are like the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. So these were the words that they shared and the thoughts and ideas that they gave were as close to Mr. Garvey's as you probably can get. So it's a whole lot to go into that further too. But the way he did the School of African Philosophy, kind of like the Kemetic Mystery School system, where it was character based, and he appointed or he handpicked certain people who would become future leaders and educated people in the association, was similar to the School of African Philosophy, where they would ask you about the 42 negative confessions, they call it. And have you ever lied? Have you ever done this, that, and the other? And once people realize you have good character, then they can empower you with the knowledge that they would be able to impart to you. So, the way it was structured, and the first course was given 42 lessons, again, like the 42 principles of Maya. And there were a lot of other things that were kind of similar to the Kemetic Mystery School, the confidentiality behind it, etc. And Miss Garvey always kind of channeling Maya with the man knows thyself and all these other things he taught over the years about ancient Kemet, as if he personally had been there and was in the school system. So anyway, but there's a lot to the philosophy, there's a lot to the history of some of these people who were students in the course, as well as the way the course was, taught to the people. And there's a lot to unpack in that alone. But we never gonna have time for everybody to kind of look at it, reflect, and talk about it. So I don't want to get too much further than that. But yeah, it's a whole lot. Even some things Tony Martin said that kind of weren't totally correct. But I had to go back and look at a couple of them that as you were talking, I was listening and kind of remembering a couple things that he just had a little bit off at the time that he was writing this. So and that play that Mr. Garvey wrote, oh my goodness. And by the way, just another correction. That's one of them I was thinking about. This may be the closest thing to a book that we have of Mr. Garvey's today. But Mr. Garvey actually did write a book, A Town Next to Hell, and he sent a copy of it to Eleanor White, who was one of his confidants. Unfortunately, somehow it got lost in the mail, and no one's ever been able to find it. But he actually did write a book, so that, it's technically not correct to say this is the closest thing. This may be the closest thing to a book that we have today. But yeah, it's definitely not the closest thing to a book he ever wrote. That would be an incorrect statement. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff in there I can unpack, but I'll just leave it there.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Moyama. Got the insight.
Well, I just want to say that I am grateful that I'm a member of the UNIA, and I'm grateful that the brothers and sisters in Georgia, y'all the movers and shakers, and I want to be grateful for the brothers and sisters in New Jersey, And the thing that gets me is like, again, we're looking at a reflection. I'm sure that as you look at these brothers and sisters right here, like he said, the disciples, that you can see yourself inside of them, what's inside of us. And we have to continue with the mission from our ancestors, right? Because as you read the book, when Marcus Garvey talks about it, he said that when he had to flee, there was rats and stuff going across his feet, and he didn't have any shoes on. You see, and he still made it to where he needed to be over here in the Americas, right? And then as time went on, because I called in Jamaica and I was like, wanted to come there and visit. And it's like, oh, we want y'all to come here, blah, 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 whatever. And the disrespect. But the thing is that this is the foundation. You have to start on your feet on the ground, the foundation. And we are supposed to be greater and better and do more because our ancestors gave us the tools. They gave us the tools. You just read a whole hour about all this stuff. We are supposed to be doing more because they set the ground for us to be more prevalent than we are right now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Race first.
Race first, and that's what this program has been about. Trying to get caught up, but we have to understand the direction that our ancestors have given us. And again, this is the direction that Mr. Garvey gave us. So we try to study this once a year, primarily for the new officers, but even the veteran officers, the older officers, a refresher, a reminder to keep us focused on the principles, the aims and objects, and how to be, how did Mr. Garvey instruct us to be leaders in the UNIA? So,
and again, we go to the point of saying that fear, right, and faith does not mix in the same circle. We have to stop making excuses for ourselves.
Session next week, we'll have a quiz on the foreword and the preface. The questions that we looked at in the beginning, such as what year the course of African philosophy started, some of the graduates that became president generals, the purpose of the course. We'll go over that in the beginning. Then we will begin the reading for lesson 1, intelligence, understanding, universal knowledge, and how to get it, or is it intelligent education? Intelligence, education, universal knowledge, and how to get it. The foundation of the course of African philosophy, one of the longest chapters. I think history, chapter 21 is the longest. The lesson 1, foundational lesson. I emphasize, we need to understand each of the previous lessons to understand the later lessons. So if we don't understand lesson 1, we're gonna have a hard time discussing, lesson 11. And that is, I didn't mean to do that, but that is literally a reality when you understand lesson 1, lesson 11. But we'll take some time for lesson 1. We'll have some questions on lesson 1 the following week, and we'll continue that rhythm until we complete the text.
All right. One question I want to just bring out there. President John, when we come in meetings, can we, we do our aim first, the pledge and everything, but can we also do, from now on, do libations or whatever for the ancestors?
Yes, we can incorporate that if we have someone.
Well, I can do that. I have a whole book over here, and I can show you guys how to do it, because our ancestors need to know that we are there for them. Let me tell you something. And Dr. Valentine talks about it. Not only does Dr. Valentine talks about it, Dr. Kalawaf talks about it too. Them Caucasians is paying homage to the ancestors, to their ancestors. Those troglodytes, they turn around and they eating people, they eating you, they're having your organs and everything else. That's why it's on the stock market. Let me tell you something. We have to come back to our ancestors and know that we here. It's like they have that river down there in Georgia. You see, you let Hollywood make a mockery of the people that actually died in that lake over there in Georgia. See? Lake Levi. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you know, huh? What is it, Sister Amina?
Lake Lanier.
Yeah, Lake Lanier. And see, that goes back to our ancestors. And it does. We cannot allow these people, the honorary supremacists, as well as the white supremacists, to keep on making mockeries out of our ancestors. So I think that it would be conducive every time we come on here, and y'all get your candles. Get your candles. And if you don't know what Orisha you are supposed to be working with, you can get just a legba alone, the opener of the way, right? I'll get a white candle. You have that candle burning the whole time that we're in the meeting, and we pour libations for our ancestors. One thing that we're going to be part of this UNIA, you have to understand, it began on the blood and the sweat of our ancestors. And we shall never, ever forget about our ancestors. And that goes for Marcus Garvey's ancestor. Amos Wilson is an ancestor. Cress Wilson is an ancestor. We can never, ever forget about them. Malcolm X is an ancestor. The mother and father of him as the littles in the UNIA are ancestors. And we also have to give homage to the ancestors that's in our DNA. We have to do that, I'm telling you, in order for us to win. The only win is unification is the only solution. And if we don't do that as brothers and sisters and actually walk this path, the nature, because you have to understand that everything was dark in the beginning, right? And Dr. Kalawafa talks about it. You know, we have to understand that we have to give homage to the Ka and the Ka'et and everything else. Everything came out of Kemet, you know, and Kemet, what they call Egypt now, because even that Jesus they talk about, which is Yahshua, he had to go and study and how he came back and help his people in Jerusalem. Right? Okay?
Sister Desiree,
it's too much whatever. I'm just saying that, you know, and our ancestors need our help. They need ancestral money. They need redemption. They need everything else. All right.
Thank you, Sister Desiree. I do want to be fair to the other individuals that have been on the call. As we close out, does anyone else have any closing comments?
I just wanted to quickly say that Bob was mentioning one of Dr. Clark's mentors, who was a UNIA commissioner. His name was Dr. Willis Huggins. While I was thinking about it, that's all.
Willis Huggins?
Yeah, UNIA commissioner.
Oh, thank you for that. Wow. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending session 1.
Well, nobody else has something to say, so I want to finish. So the thing is, the next
Sister
meeting
Desiree.
we have, I just want to tell brothers and sisters, get your candles together. Okay. And let's do libation for our ancestors every time. Our ancestors need.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, this is leadership training for the UNIA. As the text spoke on, one of the sentiments that Mr. Garvey brought with this text is a level of discipline. I need our leaders to set the example. So we'll work on that next week. Let me see. Anyone, Brother Malik, can you close us out with the motto and slogan?
Everybody put your fist in the air. One God.
One God.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Africa.
Africa.
For the Africans.
For the Africans.
Those at home.
Those at home.
And those abroad.
And those abroad.
Race first.
Race first. Up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. Shout out Dr. Shams. Race first, family.
Race